scientific first or serious breach of ethics or even a commercial scheme. The Chinese geneticist defended the world's first genetically modified babies he claimed to have created at a summit on Wednesday. But is this a defendable case at all? China's Vice Premier Liu He promoted the benefits of free trade in the face of rising protectionism during a speech in Hamburg, Germany. What tone has he set for the G20 summit, which kicks off on Friday? Welcome to The Point, live from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. A scientific first or serious breach of ethics or even a commercial scheme. The Chinese scientist at the center of a controversial genetically edited babies case defended himself at an international summit in Hong Kong on Wednesday. Despite facing a tidal wave of criticism, He Jiankui said he is proud of his work. He claimed on Monday he has created the world's first genetically edited babies by using CRISPR-Cas9, a technique that allows scientists to disable a DNA strand from human germlines. By disabling the strand, known as CCR5, the twins are supposed to be immune from HIV, which their father has. The news has drawn strong condemnation from the scientific community and raised fresh questions about the intricate relationship between science and ethics. China's National Health Commission has ordered an immediate investigation into the case, while the Chinese Society for Stem Cells Research said they strongly condemn any application of gene editing on human embryos for reproductive purposes. What new insights have emerged since He's speech Wednesday? Has he calmed the outrage or further exacerbated the alarm? Joining me in the Beijing studio is Professor Wang Haoyi from the Institute of Zoology at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and from Scotch Plains, New Jersey, Professor Linqi Zhang, Director of the Comprehensive AIDS Research Center at Tsinghua University. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Let me go to Professor Zhang first in the United States. First of all, I understand you must have watched the Q&A session and his PPT presentation in Hong Kong this afternoon. What is your overall understanding of himself, of her, I mean, as a scientist, and what he did?
And during the presentation, he presented the overall rationale and then procedures and demonstrated some of the results. The take-home message from his presentation, I learned, is that he conducted genetic editing of embryo and then implanted back into the uterus of mom, and then the two babies were born. And this was a confirmation of previously the whole community has been questioned about. And then this is not a authoritatively proven procedure, and then grossly violated the scientific ethics of entire biomedical research. So basically, we were all shocked and stunned by what he had done.
Okay, Professor Wang, having watched his announcement and having followed the news since it came out on Monday, how much do we understand about the motives of what he did and about the kind of ethical support that he claims he has at this moment?
I think from the scientific perspective, he didn't make a strong case, and what he claimed that will further immune of HIV is not solid at all. And the way he claimed his ethical stand is not being supported by the majority of the scientific community. So I think this is completely...
Would you elaborate, for instance, when you say it's not solid, when you say, you know, his research is not supported? Why? What arguments do you have?
Right, because for gene editing, there's a very clear difference of when you're editing a human somatic cell versus editing the germline. So when you're editing a somatic cell in adults, the cell or the editing you did will not pass on to the next generation or the generation following. But if you're editing a person's germline, his sperm or egg, or the fertilized embryo, you actually change the genome of their children and their children's children. So that is a very different ethical stand. And so I think the international society have a very clear a line drawn there, like saying we do not allow for the application of gene editing in human germline for reproductive purpose, unless if this is extremely severe disease or defect that there's no other way to help this unmet medical demand, then under the circumstances of broad, transparent communication with the community and ethical...
Okay, so I see 2 points here. First of all, it's extremely serious disease, then it probably become necessary, and secondly, extremely transparent procedure. Professor Zhang, in terms of HIV disease, which he claimed is a very serious problem, he said that there is no HIV vaccine, and he personally experienced some people in AIDS where 30% of a village are infected. So and even people have to give their children away to prevent a possible or potential transmission. Does that kind of explanation justify his action to disable that DNA strand which makes people prone to HIV infection, Professor Zhang?
No, this is not a justification for what he had done. And then, as we all know very well in the HIV field, and then you don't need to have a genetic editing embryo to achieve a prevention of HIV infection to a baby. Currently, we have multiple ways of measures, such as antiretroviral therapy to prevent or stop mother-baby transmission. And then even you could clean up and wash the sperm before fertilization in vitro to minimize the likelihood of infection. And in particular, the current treatments of antiretroviral therapy could reduce the viral replication in his father dramatically. As Dr. He pointed out during his presentation, the father had no detectable viruses in his blood. That says the genetic editing is added unnecessary burden to the child.
And how safe, how predictable
so
it is.
We don't
how
believe that he had any justification.
Right. How predictable is it that the child or one of the twins will really be immune to AIDS in the future? Professor Zhang, do we know at all at this moment?
We have a scientific evidence in vitro that if you have this gene defective or deleted, and then the virus, this particular cell will become relatively resistant. But even this in vitro evidence doesn't justify his in vivo manipulation. And then apart from that, as HIV is a highly variable viral species, and that and given the virus have multiple entries, doors into the cells. So eliminating the CCR5 gene alone wouldn't able to provide 100% protection to the cell and then eventually to the baby. So overall, he grossly violated the scientific ethics, and then there's no justification for what he wanted to do. So there's a severely flawed rationale to start with.
Right. It's also very difficult to know who will be responsible for the health of the baby as they grow up, and what kind of implication is there when they get married, or when they bear children. But another very important factor is the lack of transparency here. And during the announcement this afternoon, he talked about, but he was very evasive. Basically, he said that the parents came from a volunteer group of HIV and AIDS people, and that they talked to them, they sent them printed material, and they first have an informal consultation for 2 hours, and then he had a so-called formal consultation with the parents, with the couple, for over an hour, and the parents also took material home to read. And so, Professor Wang, are we missing the point here? How much would be enough to help the parents understand the risk and benefit of such an operation? Who has the right to decide whether a baby can be genetically modified?
I think what he mentioned in his talk in the meeting, he said he spent 1 hour and 10 minutes to talk to the parents to explain this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether the parents are well educated, but if they're not familiar with molecular biology, they need a lot more than that to fully understand what this procedure really is and the potential risk and problem.
Yeah, and in terms of informed consent process, when he was asked, he said, well, I talked to different people, I talked to experts in the United States and at different conferences. Professor Zhang, what kind of impression do you get from his explanation as to how due procedure has been respected?
My clear impression from his presentation is that he used many of the buzzwords for the procedure and the process, but he doesn't really understand the content of each scientific terms, because when you have, they put out IRB and then get a formal approval, and then that's very different from talking to people here, there in the US, in China, and then it seems he is living in his own vacuum to try to understand the buzzword of all necessary procedures and regulations. So I don't think he really fully understands the scientific spirit and then the regulatory procedure and the moral standard in conducting science. So this raises a bigger issue for not just the society to understand this experiment, but also for the entire scientific community have to operate under a certain scientific, ethical, and moral standard. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster for our society.
Yeah, Professor Wang.
I completely agree. I think what he did is really, both on three levels, is extremely poorly, which is scientifically it's not sound, technically is not the most advanced, and also ethically he showed a lot of ignorance. So it's a very, very bad issue.
Yeah, but at this time, people are also paying attention to the overall development and ecology, let's say, of China's gene editing research community. For instance, the CNN has this story saying that China has invested heavily in gene editing technology, including the first use of gene editing tool, CRISPR-Cas9 in humans in 2016, and the first reported use of gene editing technology to modify non-viable human embryos in 2015. So I want to ask Professor Zhang exactly where China is in terms of level of development in gene editing, and why do you think this is happening in China and not anywhere else in the world?
You know, we scientists in the field have witnessed the rapid progress in the biomedical science and technologies. And one of the technology now we are referring to the gene editing technology, including Cas9, CRISPR technology, and apart from this, we have a talent technology, we have a ZFN technology, we have all kinds of technologies that are being developed and optimized. And then China has invested tremendous amount of resources into this field. So does US and many other developed countries. And this is not China alone to develop and then optimize this. It's actually up to the scientists around the world to make it optimized and then safe for use in both in vitro and in human use. So I don't think there's anything wrong to invest heavily into this technology, because this technology will empower us to cure many rare genetic diseases and provide benefit to millions of unfortunately affected
Professor
people.
Wang. Yeah.
But all of this doesn't justify anything for this immature technology to the genetic use.
Okay, Professor
Can I just
Wang.
say, He Jiankui, I'm talking to you, and I think you know what you did, and you know why you did it, and shame on you. And he cannot do this by himself, and whatever other people that supported him, helped him, and guided him, misguided him, manipulated him, either in China or in other place, no matter what is your scientific credential is, what your purpose is, shame on you. You are part of this anti-humanity crime. That's my personal take.
Okay, I think that feeling is most likely echoed by many.
Professor Wang,
Yeah, go ahead, Professor Zhang.
Yeah, we agree completely. We agree completely with Professor Wang here. You know, Chinese scientists are committed to conduct highest level in scientific and ethical research, not to be slurred or ashamed by or marked by this instance. So we will safeguard our scientific legal principles. And then I representing here, not just myself, but all the AIDS research community that we gathered over 140 signatures to condemn the issue and then to protect, safeguard our Chinese reputation as well as the reputation of scientists in this field worldwide.
That's an individual case here, I hope. Anyway, we are going to leave it here. Many thanks to our guest, Professor Wang Haoyi from the Institute of Zoology at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and from Scotch Plains, New Jersey, Professor Zhang Linqi, Director of the Comprehensive AIDS Research Center at Tsinghua University. You have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. We'll take a short break, and when I come back, China's Vice Premier promoted the benefits of free trade in the face of rising protectionism during his visit to Germany. Did he win new support ahead of Friday's G20 summit? No country can win a trade war, said China's Vice Premier Liu He in a keynote speech at an economic conference in Hamburg, Germany on Tuesday. He said that protectionist and unilateral approaches on trade would only deepen economic uncertainty. He also appealed to Europe to offer joint support for free trade in the face of rising protectionism. As Liu wrapped up his 4-day visit on Wednesday, his speech is thought to have set a positive tone ahead of the G20 summit, which starts Friday. Liu's remarks follow comments, however, by U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday, who said it is highly unlikely that the U.S. would hold off on increasing tariffs on $200 billion US dollars of goods from 10% to 20%. So what's the prospect for the meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Donald Trump on Saturday? What are the implications for Europe of the meeting? To answer these questions, I'm joined by Professor Cui Hongjian, Director of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies, and in Tallinn, Estonia, Dr. Florian Hartleb, Research Associate with the Winfried Martin Center for European Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Professor Cui, let me go to you first. Liu He has been heavily involved in resolving U.S.-China trade dispute. His visit to Germany was seen as a surprise to those who thought he'd be in Washington, D.C. meeting U.S. counterparts. Why is he in Germany at this moment?
Yes, as we know that now this trade issue not only between China and the U.S., I think it's a very general issue and also related with Germany, with some other European economies. As we know, now there's a very complicated, also close relations between China, U.S. and Europe. For example, the European Union is the biggest trade partner now with China, and the United States is the second one. So I think, how could we deal with some this close but complicated relations? It will be very important. And now I think that it appears that there will be some more joint understanding or common ground between China and Europe. But of course, as we know, when Europe is facing the pressure from Washington, it shows a little bit hesitant to get some more close cooperation with China. So I think it's a very, very good opportunity for Mr. Liu to get some more dialogue and exchange with his counterparts in Germany and in Europe.
Florian, analysts believe that Germany's export-oriented economic model would have the most to lose from an all-out global trade war if, for instance, U.S. tariffs against Chinese goods go from 10% to 25%, and Germany, like China, has a surplus with the U.S., making Germany a natural partner in China's anti-protectionist measures. How important is the trade war to the German economy?
Yeah, the German economy is still on the rise. However, there are some indicators that the picture could change very soon. For example, in the car industry, and not by accident, the German Minister for Traffic was part of the talks now with China. And of course, also Germany is very much afraid of the protectionism in US, and that's why the Chinese-German relations are very important, not just concerning hard economic facts, but also about the soft factor to building up a new trust after some complications in the last years.
Well, in his keynote speech, Liu He introduced China's current economic situation and development prospects. Here are some of the key phrases. For instance, he expects a great improvement in intellectual property protection. This has been a key U.S. demand, by the way. He also listed several measures, such as a revised patent law and harsher punishment for offenders. Another is the demand that China should import more, to which he replied that China has already cut tariffs on 1,500 imported items, bringing the country's average tariff rate to around the level of developed nations. So, Professor Cui, was the Hamburg summit a good venue to get the message across effectively? Do you think the U.S. will hear this and respond?
Yes, certainly. I think because the Hamburg forum is a very influential platform for these business people and also politicians to get some more communication with each other. So I think, yes, especially in Europe, as we know now, between Europe and the United States, they are trying to get some joint stance against China. For example, we can find some joint statement previously about how about these complaints about the Chinese IPR issue or some other. So I think now it's a good time for Mr. Liu, firstly, to persuade his counterpart in Germany, in Europe, and also this audience from Europe to understand fully what's the policy of China to get a wider, open and reform.
Yeah.
And then to transfer some, I think, a very, very important message to Washington.
Okay. Vice Premier Liu He did mention that competition in the economy is very important, and said that China's door of opening up will open even wider. Florian, we know that Premier Liu or Chinese leaders have repeated that message actually many times on different occasions. What's the significance of saying this in front of a German audience? Do you think it has been necessary and effective?
Yeah, I mean, there is a big demand for investments of China on the German market, also to open the world for the free trade, and China already has a big influence on the 10 key industrial areas, what a study from the Bertelsmann Stiftung is showing. So basically there is a big influence, and in some regards it was very much helpful for the German economy, for some special companies as well, and that's why it is about to build up relations of trust, and also maybe to work together now for the G20 summit, and to build up something also against the invisible third partner doing the talks in Hamburg, Mr. Trump.
Well, Chinese investments in Europe, as Florian just mentioned, reportedly rose from 700 million euros in 2008 to 30 billion in 2017, so an increase of over 40 times in a decade. However, a raft of high-profile acquisitions of German companies in the past 2 years raised a lot of concerns about Chinese takeover of key companies in key sectors. Professor Cui, what can China do to assuage the local regulators and the public, the general public, about the suspicion surrounding Chinese investments?
Yes, as we know now, to pay some more attention on Chinese investment in Europe and Germany now become a very big concern from European side. I think that we can find some reasons behind it. Firstly, for Europe, for Germany, not yet they are ready for this very, high-speed increase of investment from China to Europe. And secondly, yes, I think at the beginning, both two sides didn't get some maybe some more communication or some signatures between also in the regulations or rules like that. But I think now it's good time for China and Europe, for China and Germany, we can find a new approach to get some more communication. We need to get some more synergy of rules. I think indeed this visit by Mr. Liu will give some more, big help for this communication.
Okay. At the beginning of this section, I mentioned President Trump's tweet about the high likeliness that the trade dispute between China and the U.S. is likely to escalate. So, Florian, what's your prediction on the prospects for President Xi and President Trump's meeting on Saturday in Argentina?
I don't hope too much. I think the escalation concerning trade between US and China will remain, and also this meeting now and this good negotiations between China and Germany. Germany is the most important economic power in Europe, and all we know in European Union that now we have to deal with the Brexit and the consequences of the Brexit, and that's why it's very, very important now that Europe, Germany and China are working very closely together.
Professor Cui, your final take on a very important point that Florian raised, the Brexit, right? Now that we know at least there is an agreement between the Britain Prime Minister
May.
What's her name? the British Prime Minister
May.
And
Madam
the and the EU.
May,
yeah. So how does that weigh in on the situation on trade?
Yes, I think now it looks like, according to this current agreement, it looks like there will be a soft landing of this Brexit issue. I think it will give a more positive message to the international community and also to the world economy, because once there will be not so big and a sharp change, between the EU and the UK, I think there will be some more confidence from the market, and then it will give some more contributions to the stability of the economy.
Okay, that was Theresa May, by the way, now that I remember. Okay, many thanks to my two guests, Professor Cui Hongjian, Director of European Studies at the China Institute of International Studies, and Dr. Florian Hartleb, Research Associate with the Winfried Martin Center for European Studies. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.